Standards for sexuality education in Europe. A framework for policymakers, educational and health authorities and so-called specialists, courtesy of the World Health Organization, or their Europe branch anyway, in collaboration with the BZGA, which is the Federal Centre for Health Education. I'd never heard of them before now, where they are described as being a governmental authority working in the sphere of responsibility of the Federal Ministry for Health, established with the aim of preserving and promoting human health, and was assigned the following tasks: elaboration of principles and guidelines concerning the content and methods of practice of health education, basic and advanced training of professionals in the field of health education, coordination and strengthening of health education in Germany, and international cooperation as a whole. So, partnering with the World Health Organization's Europe branch, they've released their publication, which has elements incorporated within that are rather questionable, to say the least. It's nothing new, as far as I'm concerned, living in Rainbow Unicorn Land, because the SMP, or should I say UNESCO, the United Nations, because the SNP's incompetent shows on many occasions, and they've shown themselves to be nothing but a puppet party, but I digress. The promotion of pornography, and going into some great detail in PowerPoint presentations for teachers to bring up to teach children about, let's just say, oral sex and the like, the promotion of all degenerate behaviour, realistically, porn, feminism, LGBT as a whole, compulsory of course, you can't opt out, and it talks about making it so parents can't allow their children to opt out in this document too. 68 odd pages, so I'll briefly go through certain elements that I found, but I'll leave the link for anybody that wishes to view it themselves. So it says here, the preface, that the World Health Organization's Europe region faces many so-called challenges with regard to sexual health, rising rates of HIV and other sexually transmitted infections. So we're going to teach them about transgenderism and gender identities and masturbation, because for some strange reason they believe that is enriching, empowering, and above all else is better for humanity as a whole. It's a common theme with these people, and I don't really need to explain it. You're not an idiot, I'm sure. These people say one thing and it means the polar opposite. As cliche as it sounds, it realistically is that. Children and young people are crucial to the improvement of sexual health in general. They need to know about sexuality in terms of both risk and enrichment in order to develop a positive and responsible attitude towards it. In this way, they will be enabled to have responsibly, not only to themselves but also towards others in the society that they live in. The introduction of sexuality education, especially in schools, is not always easy. Resistance is very often encountered, mostly based on fears and misconceptions of sexuality education. They're talking about parents, of course. We hope that these standards can play a positive part in encouraging countries to start introducing sexuality education, or to broaden existing programs with a view to achieving holistic sexuality education. And purpose. This document presents recommended standards for sexuality education. The standards indicate what children and young people at different ages should know and understand, based on what they believe and say they should know and understand. Not what's best for them, what these people claim is best for them. What situations or challenges they should be able to handle at those ages, and which values and attitudes they need to develop. All this is so they can develop in a satisfactory, positive and healthy manner as regards to their sexuality. In the realm of advocacy, it can serve to confine policymakers of the importance of introducing sexuality indoctrination, or to broaden existing approaches. Standards are a good starting point for a dialogue on sexuality indoctrination with relevant decision makers and stakeholders. There's these stakeholders again in the field. Imagine being a stakeholder in something as grotesque as this. Makes you wonder, eh? The need for sexuality education. The need for sexuality indoctrination, has been triggered by various developments during the past. These include globalization and migration of new population groups that we didn't ask for, with different cultures and religious backgrounds, the rapid spread of new media, particularly the internet, and the emergence and spread of HIV and AIDS, increasing concerns about sexual abuse of children and adolescents, and not least changing attitudes towards sexuality and changing sexual behaviour among young people. These new developments require effective strategies to enable young people to deal with their sexuality in a safe and satisfactory manner. Formalised sexuality education, indoctrination, is well placed to reach a majority of the target group. The target group, For a proper understanding of this document, it's necessary for us to discuss what standards can mean in practice, given the way that human sexuality typically develops during childhood and adolescence. As been described as a considerable part in learning in the field of sexuality occurs outside the sphere of professionals, yet they do have a considerable part to play. Clearly, formal education hardly forms human sexuality, and the role of sexual educators tends to focus on problems, such as unintended pregnancy and sexually transmitted infections, and how these can be prevented, easily generating criticism that their approach is predominantly negative. So you've got a great grand solution to that problem, and you don't think that your so-called solution is not going to bring about more criticism? I beg to differ on that front. In the process of growing up, children and adolescents gradually acquire knowledge and develop images, values and attitudes and skills related to the human body, intimate relationships and sexuality. The most important ones, particularly at the early stage of development, are informal sources, including parents, who are the most important at the youngest age. They're the most important in a child's life, full stop. The role of professionals, either medical, social or psychological, is usually not pronounced in the process, which is understandable because assistance from professionals is sought almost only when there are or is a problem. A problem only a professional can help to solve, so-called professional. However, growing emphasis in Western culture in general on the prevention of problems, which also increasingly pervades the field of intimacy and human sexuality, has given rise to calls for more active involvement. On the one hand, young people need love, space and support in their everyday social environment to develop their sexual identity, and on the other hand, they also need to acquire specific knowledge. Roughly speaking, at the beginning of the third millennium, young people in Europe have had their first sexual contact by the age of 16 to 18, having several partners before marrying or permanently cohabiting. Around age 25, and they have had their first child by age 28 to 30. And during this period, before settling into a stable relationship, the twin risks of unintended pregnancy and sexually transmitted infections are of concern for both individuals and public health. Other factors also contribute to a stronger focus on adolescent sexuality and sexual health. Sexual abuse and violence, traditionally taboo issues that tended to be covered up, came out more into the open and gave rise to more moral indignation and calls for preventative action. Similarly, the sexualization of the media and advertising were increasingly felt to be negative, or have a negative influence, on the perceptions of sexuality for young people, requiring for some form of counterbalancing action. And you've all heard of human rights. They're now talking about sexual rights. Sexual rights being, of course, the embracing of the right to information and education. As mentioned before, the 2002 WHO meeting also came up with a draft definition of sexual rights, which reads as follows. Sexual rights embrace human rights that are already recognised in national laws, international human rights documents and other consensus statements, including the right for all persons free of coercion, discrimination and violence to the highest attainable standard of sexual health, including access to sexual and reproductive healthcare services, seek, receive and impart information relating to sexuality, sexuality education, respect for bodily integrity, choosing their partner, decide to be sexually active or not, consensual sexual relations, consensual marriage, decide whether or not and when to have children, and pursue a satisfying, safe and pleasurable sexual life. A note of caution is needed here, however, as clearly some of the rights mentioned have been conceived with adult persons as the point of reference. This means that not all of these rights are automatically applicable to children and adolescents. For example, it is clear that issues like consensual marriage or the right to decide on childbearing do not apply to children or young adolescents, but anything about a safe, satisfying and pleasurable sexual lifestyle, well, let's teach the children all about that. I'm sure they can't wait. The right of the child to information has also been acknowledged by the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, which was conceived in 1989 and has since been ratified by the vast majority of states. It clearly states that the right to freedom of expression and the right and the freedom to seek, receive and impart information and ideas of all kinds. Article 13 and Article 19 referring to states' obligation to provide children with educational measures to protect them from sexual abuse. In this context, it is useful to introduce the concept of intimate citizenship, which relates to sexual rights from a social science perspective, with researchers in social and sexual studies and science currently calling for the establishment of moral negotiation as a valid sexual morality of today, with the essence of this morality being that the issues should be negotiated in a spirit of mutual consent by mature participants who are equal in status, rights and power. What? Means learning about the cognitive, emotional, social and interactive and physical aspects of sexuality, starting early in childhood and progressing through adolescence and adulthood. For children and young people, it aims at supporting and protecting sexual development. It gradually equips and empowers children and young people with information, skills and poison to understand and enjoy their sexuality, have safe and fulfilling relationships, and responsibility for their own and other people's sexual health and well-being, enabling them to make choices which enhance their quality of life and contribute to a compassionate and just society. Just don't even fucking get me started on how hungry I'm getting right now, man. Sexuality is a central part of being human. Is that so? People have the right to be informed. The United Nations, UNCRC, states the right to information in the state's obligation to provide children with educational measures that they themselves provide. You see how this works? It then goes on to talk about sexual rights as human rights. The right to education and information. All persons without discrimination have the right to education and information generally, and to comprehensive sexual education and information. Human rights is the guiding principle of the reproductive health strategy to progress towards the attainment of international development goals and targets. The reproductive health strategy. I wonder what that could be. The World Association for Sexual Health equally understands sexual rights as an integral component of basic human rights and therefore as an inalienable and universal. In its recent publication entitled Sexual Health in a Millennium, the association put towards the idea that sexual health needs to be promoted as the central strategy in reaching the Millennium Development Goals, which was the precursor to the Sustainable Development Goals. In this context, 8 goals are identified, of which the fourth states universal access to comprehensive sexuality education and information, because we need to depopulate. That's what this is about. The fear that sexuality education might lead to more or earlier sexual activity by young people is not justified, as research results show. Oh, yeah, fuck off. Talk bollocks, man. What it does lead to, though, however, is more kids that think they're trannies. So, what have we got to say about that? Generally speaking, during the first 6 years, children move rapidly from complete dependence to limited independence, becoming aware of their own bodies. Children have sexual feelings, even in early infancy. Between the 2nd and 3rd year of their lives, they discover the physical differences between men and women. During this time, children start to discover their own bodies. During this early childhood masturbation, self-stimulation, and they may also try to examine their bodies of their friends, playing doctor. Children learn about the environment by experiment, and sexuality is no different from other areas in this respect. Extensive observation research has identified common sexual behaviour in children, ensuring that this kind of behaviour is regarded as normal. By exploring sexual feelings and desires and by asking questions, children learn more about sexuality from the age of 3. They understand that adults are secretive about this subject. They test adults' limits, for instance, by undressing without warning or by using sexually charged language. Young children are extremely curious and ask a lot of questions, gradually losing their egocentricity. They become increasingly able to put themselves in somebody else's shoes. As language ability develops, physical contact tends to take a back seat. Children have seen several possible ways to express themselves, with older children beginning to develop a sense of shame. And family background is often one of the factors involved. Around the age of 6, children are still very inquisitive and start noticing that adults are no longer as receptive to their questions as they claim to be. To find out more, they turn to their peers, and children of primary school age become more introverted and prudish. Sexuality is dormant, and their moral development fosters a growing sense of shame about their sexuality. Sexual games take place during this phase. This has been observed among 1/3 of 8-year-old boys, the percentage gradually increasing with age. By and large, the extent of sexual activity is lower among girls, but sexual interest also increases as they get older. Sexuality of children is much broader than the average adult. It can be regarded as one aspect of the development in sexuality, which is a part of psychological and biological social developments. Pre-adolescence, shift of interest, sexual development during puberty. Between the ages of 11 and 13, the interests of pre-adolescents shift as they start concentrating more on the detailed knowledge of the body. During puberty, social identity is supplemented by the search for psychological identity. Adolescents reflect on their personal qualities and significance and consider their place in the world. Sexual development is accelerated during puberty. Perceptions and motives related to sexuality require a social dimension with and through other people. The differences between boys and girls become more pronounced, yada yada yada. At this point in our lives, young people are going through a period of profound reflection, gradually learning to think about things that are not perceptible and events not personally experienced. Moreover, young people develop the ability to combine individual qualities to form an entity which enables them to think in a problem-solving way. Between the ages of 12 and 20, young people gradually develop their sexual orientation. At the same time, they form and consolidate sexual preference. In order to get a clear picture of specific development phases on which the sexuality education matrix in part 2 of the document is based, the following table-like presentation has been included, which sums up specific issues already mentioned above. Stage 1, 0 to 3 years old. Children's sexual development starts at birth. Babies focus entirely on their senses. Babies are busy discovering the world. This is evident from their tendency to suck toys, look at faces, or... I'm not reading that, man. I don't fucking care. I'm not reading that. I'm just not going... No. As I said, leave the link to this, so feel free to read for that yourself. I just do not feel comfortable reading that stuff. At the very heart of sexuality education is the competence of the educator. It's important to stress, though, that educators delivering sexuality education do not need to be high-level professionals. Teachers delivering sexuality education should ideally be trained to do so. Here we go again. So, teachers already in the profession currently need to be trained. They need to be trained to embrace this dogma, this rhetoric, this ideology. And then up-and-coming teenagers, they'll be groomed to already have incorporated that into their worldview. As it kind of alludes to here, if no trained educators are available, this should not be used as an excuse for not delivering sexuality education. Sexuality education should be introduced while the training of teachers is done along the way. Organising training programs, need to take into account the level at which the educator is going to teach sexuality education, the requirements vary according to school type and age group. Competent educators need training in sexuality education as well as openness for the subject. So already they're competent in their field, their profession, but that's not enough. They need specific training. And on top of that, they also need a high motivation to embrace said training. They need to firmly believe in the principles of the sexuality education outlined above. So they need to firmly believe in this bullshit that they are trying to impose. This implies that school authorities should not pressurise somebody who is unwilling to deliver sexuality education. Instead, teachers need to be stimulated and supported. So if they're not willing to do it, you're not going to pressurise them. No. You're going to support them. So you're going to get what you want anyway, or you intend to. So instead of just pressurising them, you don't want to appear as if you're pressurising them. That doesn't look too good. You want to support them. You want to, quote-unquote, stimulate them to embrace this bollocks. And here we have the second part of this document, where they've got all the age groups, and they've got it's the same layout really of many of these publications, as you'll come to see. The human body and development for 0 to 4-year-olds. Give information about all body parts and their functions, different bodies in different sexes, and body hygiene. Name the body skills, enable children to have the skills such as name the body parts, practice hygiene, recognize body differences, express needs and wishes. Attitudes help children to develop a positive body image and self-esteem, respect for difference and appreciation of their own body, an appreciation for the sense of well-being, closeness and trust created by body experience and experience of bonding, respect for gender equality, of course. Fertility and reproduction. So they want children to be given information at 0 to 4 about pregnancy, birth and babies, basics of human reproduction, where babies come from. Talk about these issues by providing them with the correct vocabulary, acceptance of different ways of becoming a child of a family. Sexuality, enjoyment and pleasure when touching one's own body. Early childhood masturbation. Discovery of own body and own genitalia. The fact that enjoyment of physical closeness is a normal part of everyone's life. Tenderness and physical closeness as an expression of love and affection. Gaining awareness of gender identity. 0 to 4. Talk about unpleasurable feelings in one's own body. Express own needs, wishes and boundaries. A positive attitude toward one's body with all its functions and respect for others. Curiosity regarding own and others' bodies. Emotions. Different types of love. Yes and no feelings. What about no to being taught this? No, of course not. Show and feel empathy. I hate when they do this. You can't teach empathy. Sociopaths exist. Psychopaths exist. They're writing this document as it goes. But if you could teach empathy, if empathy could be taught, then there would be no such thing as a sociopath and or a psychopath. You cannot teach empathy. Relationship and lifestyles for 0 to 4-year-olds. Well, that's normal, really. Sexuality, health and well-being, good and bad experiences of your body. What feels good? If the experienced feeling is not good, you do not always have to comply. Or you don't always have to comply, but you know. Trust their instincts, apply the 3-step model. Say no, go away, talk to somebody you trust. Achieve feelings of well-being, appreciation of the body. Sexuality and rights, the right to be safe and protected. The right to explore gender identities. 0 to 4. The right to ask questions about sexuality and responsibility of adults for the safety of children. Behavior, norms about nakedness. Differentiate between private and public behaviour. Respect social rules and cultural norms. Behave appropriately according to context. Know where you can touch. Respect for their own bodies and other bodies. Acceptance of social rules about privacy and intimacy. The human body and human development. Information to be given about all body parts and their functions. Body hygiene. Different bodies and different sexes. A positive attitudes to help children develop a positive gender identity, a positive body image, a respect for difference or diversity, respect for gender equality. So they're still just dripping it in there, gender equality. It's feminism. Myths related to reproduction, e.g. in some countries, children are told that a new baby has been brought by the stork. Oh my god. 4 to 6. 4 to 6. Vocabulary, sorry. Sexuality, enjoyment and pleasure when touching one's own body. Early childhood masturbation. Discovering one's own body. The meaning and expression of sexuality. Appropriate sexual language. Sexual feelings. Talk about sexual matters and consolidate their gender identity. A positive body image, yada yada. Emotions. Wow, what is this, man? This is fucked up. Relationships and lifestyle, same-sex relationships, different concepts of family, relating to each other and to family members in appropriate ways, live together in families based on mutual respect, build up and maintain relationships, attitudes that can help children to develop, oh, of course, acceptance of diversity, of course. 6 to 9-year-olds, body changes, menstruation, ejaculation, individual variation in development over time. An acceptance of insecurities arising from their own body at 6 years old. A positive gender identity at 7 years old. A positive body image and self-esteem. Well, fair enough, I suppose. Fertility and reproduction. Choices about parenthood and pregnancy. Don't have children. The basic idea of contraception. Please use it. Different methods of contraception. Please use it. Sexuality, or what does it say? Acceptance of diversity. Some people choose to have children, others choose not to. And you're going to tell them all about the wonders of not having children and all the problems that arise from having them, aren't you? Sexuality, love, tenderness, appropriate sexual language. This is just bizarre. 9 to 12 years old. The human body and human development. Body hygiene, menstruation, ejaculation, of course. Early changes in puberty. Integrate these changes into their own lives. Know and use the correct vocabulary. An understanding and acceptance of changing and differences in bodies, size and shape of penises, breasts and vulva can vary significantly, and standards of beauty change over time and different between cultures. Fertility and reproduction. Understand the relationship between menstruation, ejaculation and fertility. Use condoms and contraceptives effectively in the future. The understanding that contraception is the responsibility of both sexes. Sexuality, the first sexual experience, gender orientation, sexual behaviour, love, being in love, pleasure, masturbations and orgasms. 9 to 12. Communicate and understand different sexual feelings and talk about sexuality in an appropriate way. None of this is fucking appropriate. None of this is appropriate. I left school in 2014. I've said this before in multiple videos talking about similar stuff. I left school in 2014. We got taught the bare minimum in regards to sexual education. I didn't leave school as a rampant misogynistic rapist in waiting. I didn't leave school riddled with STDs. I didn't leave school with any of these problems that they proclaim they're intending to solve with their bollocks. This is disgusting shit that I'm reading here. The SNP are ahead of the curve, ahead of the game in this regard, but this shit is now being rolled out worldwide, or they're attempting to, and the majority of people clap like fucking seals on a Thursday night and grovel at the feet of all these wonderful politicians that are keeping them indoors, going by statistics and fabricated data from the World Health Organization. Meanwhile, the same World Health Organization is intending to teach your children about wanking. And quite frankly, I can't read through this. I'm just scrolling down. And it's just... what do you say about this, man? I don't know what to say. Peace.